As Zimbabwe continues debating Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3, one political analyst is urging citizens to stop asking whether the bill is good or bad. Instead, he says Zimbabweans should ask a different and perhaps more important question: what will Zimbabwe look like after CAB3 becomes law? Those are the words of political commentator Richard Runyararo Mahomva, whose remarks have sparked fresh debate across social media and political circles. According to Mahomva, the country's focus should no longer be limited to parliamentary votes or political arguments. The real conversation, he says, should be about what CAB3 means for the future of every Zimbabwean. Will governance change? Will public institutions function differently? What impact could the amendments have on ordinary citizens? These are the questions now dominating public discussion. Stay tuned. And before we continue, please subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications for daily Zimbabwe political news and analysis. Let's get into it.
So politics has decided what it wants. So which means that Zimbabweans should no longer be discussing whether CAB3 is good or bad at this point. But what Zimbabweans should be discussing is, what are we going to do when this thing becomes law? How is business going to survive when this thing becomes law? And that conversation is not happening. It is because the structure of our education has taught us that no, corporates, the academia should not take a side. But we all know that in every phenomena of human existence, not taking a side is taking a side. Therefore, under the circumstances, we are saying we have had the political conversation, we have had partisan conversations, but what is the space of a young lawyer that is running a company? What is the space for employers, some whom I'm seeing, CEOs? What is the effect on revenue growth of our institutions? And I hope that as we are going to come up with these resolutions, we should be able to unpack issues of sustainability. Yes, the ambassador presented a point which sounded like banter to say where
the Constitutional Amendment number 3 bill remains one of the most significant political developments in Zimbabwe this year. Having already passed through the National Assembly and progressed through important stages in the Senate, the bill continues attracting attention from politicians, lawyers, civil society organizations, academics, and ordinary citizens. Much of the national debate has focused on whether the proposed amendments should be supported or rejected. However, political analyst Richard Runyararo Mahomva believes the conversation should now move beyond that question. According to Mahomva, the most important issue is understanding what Zimbabwe could look like after the constitutional amendments become law. He argues that constitutional changes should not simply be viewed as political victories or defeats. Instead, citizens should examine how those changes might influence governance, institutions, and daily life in the years ahead. For him, the real discussion is about consequences rather than political slogans. Constitutions are often described as the foundation upon which a nation is governed. They define how public institutions operate, establish the powers of government, protect rights, and provide rules that guide national leadership. Because of this, constitutional amendments naturally generate significant public interest. Their effects often extend far beyond the political debates taking place inside Parliament. Mahomva's comments encourage Zimbabweans to think about long-term governance What happens after the parliamentary process is complete? How will institutions implement the new constitutional provisions? Will the amendments improve public administration? Will they strengthen accountability? Will they contribute to stability and national development? These are some of the broader questions his remarks have brought into focus. Supporters of CAB3 argue that constitutional reform is a normal feature of democratic governance. They believe constitutions must evolve over time to respond to changing national circumstances and improve institutional effectiveness. According to this perspective, the amendments represent an opportunity to modernize aspects of Zimbabwe's governance framework. Critics, however, continue expressing concerns about several provisions contained within the bill. Some legal experts and opposition politicians argue that constitutional amendments should always receive the highest level of public scrutiny because their impact can last for generations. Others emphasize that constitutional legitimacy depends not only on parliamentary approval, but also on sustained public confidence. Political analysts note that Mahomva's intervention differs from many previous discussions because it shifts attention away from immediate political competition. Rather than focusing exclusively on who wins or loses the debate, he invites citizens to consider the practical effects that constitutional changes may have on governance and national development. This approach has attracted considerable attention across social media. Observers say constitutional debates are often among the most important discussions any country can have. Unlike ordinary legislation, constitutional amendments shape the framework within which future governments operate. They influence institutions, public administration, leadership structures, and the relationship between citizens and the state. That is why constitutional reforms frequently generate passionate public engagement. As Zimbabwe continues discussing CAB3, many citizens remain focused on issues that directly affect everyday life. Employment opportunities, economic growth, healthcare, education, infrastructure, public services. For many people, the success of any constitutional reform will ultimately be judged by whether it contributes to improving these areas. Supporters believe the proposed amendments will strengthen governance and improve institutional performance. Critics argue that constitutional reforms must always be measured against democratic principles, accountability, and public participation. Both perspectives continue shaping national conversation as Parliament advances the bill. Mahomva's remarks, therefore, serve as a reminder that constitutional debates do not end when parliamentary votes conclude. The real impact of constitutional reform is often measured over many years. Its influence can extend across multiple governments and generations. That is why many governance experts encourage citizens to remain informed and engaged throughout the entire process. As Zimbabwe moves closer to completing the legislative journey of CAB3, attention is gradually shifting from parliamentary procedure toward implementation and future implications. How will institutions adapt? What practical changes will citizens notice? How will governance evolve under the amended constitution? These questions are likely to remain central long after the parliamentary debates have ended. Whether Zimbabweans support or oppose Constitutional Amendment number 3, one point raised by Richard Runyararo Mahomva, has clearly entered the national conversation. The future deserves as much attention as the present, because once constitutional changes take effect, their impact will extend far beyond today's political headlines. Do you think Zimbabweans should focus more on the long-term impact of CAB3 rather than only debating whether it should pass? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. If you enjoyed this report, Please subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications for daily Zimbabwe political news and analysis. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.